Story, the hotel room that didn't exist. It was supposed to be the perfect spring break. The sun was still high when 5 of us, me, Ryan, Lucas, Jen, and Maya, pulled up to the Coral Coast Resort in Panama City Beach. The ocean sparkled just beyond the rows of pastel-colored condos. A salty breeze rolled in from the Gulf, blending with the thump of EDM music and the buzz of excited college students already filling the poolside bar. We were exhausted but exhilarated. 12 hours on the road from Ohio, but finally here. Ryan, always the organized one, handled the bookings. He had a spreadsheet, a backup folder, confirmation emails. No way anything could go wrong. At the front desk, a smiling receptionist named Tara welcomed us. Her name tag gleamed beneath string lights. The lobby smelled like coconut lotion and hotel air freshener. Everything felt exactly like we imagined spring break should. Until Tara looked at her screen and frowned. "Looks like you have 2 rooms under this name," she said, tapping the keyboard again. "Rooms 321 and 322. Ryan blinked. "No, there should be 3. I booked 321, 322, and 606. Tara tilted her head. "Let me check." She typed for a moment longer. The cursor blinked. Then she shook her head slowly. "I'm sorry, we don't have a room 606 in our active system. That wing is closed." "What do you mean closed?" Lucas asked, leaning in. "We have the email. Want me to pull it up?" Ryan was already scrolling through his phone, his brow furrowing. "Here, confirmation from your site. 3 rooms, 606 included, booked 2 months ago." Tara took the phone and stared. This looks legit, but our top floor, rooms 600 through 620, were closed in 2003. There was a fire, it's sealed off." Silence settled over our group. "A fire?" Maya asked. Tara nodded. "It was before my time, some wiring issue. They never reopened that wing. No one's allowed up there." We exchanged glances. A strange mix of confusion and discomfort settled over us. Ryan looked stunned. "I literally got a confirmation 2 weeks ago," he muttered. "You're welcome to take the 2 rooms now," Tara offered. "They're ready." Ryan hesitated but eventually nodded. "Yeah, sure, I guess we'll figure it out later." Our rooms were nice, small balconies with a view of the pool, a little worn around the edges, but nothing we couldn't live with. We dropped our bags, cracked open the first beers of the trip, and tried to let it go. But Ryan kept checking his phone. "I don't get it," he said for the 10th time. "How do you book a room that doesn't exist?" Lucas, always the joker, raised a can. "Maybe we're cursed. Spring break ghost story, anyone?" Jen threw a pillow at him. "Not funny." Ryan chuckled, but it was hollow. That night, after dinner and a few drinks, we were sprawled out on the beach behind the hotel watching the waves. The air had cooled and the stars were peeking through a hazy sky. It should have felt peaceful, but I kept catching Ryan glancing back at the hotel. "You good?" I asked. He shrugged. "Yeah, just, I don't know. That room number, 606. It feels familiar, like deja vu." "You've been here before?" "No, first time." He looked down at the sand. "I just keep thinking about it. I swear I've seen that number somewhere before. And when she said fire, I got this weird chill." "Probably just tired, man." "Yeah, probably." But I didn't believe it. Not really. Back in the hotel, we called it a night. Jen and Maya took 321. Ryan, Lucas, and I took 322. We flipped for the floor bed. Lucas lost. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the door clicking shut. Ryan's bed was empty. I sat up, rubbed my eyes. Lucas was snoring softly, cocooned in a blanket burrito. "Ryan?" I called out. No answer. I grabbed my phone. A text had come in just a few minutes ago. Room 606 opened. Someone inside invited me. Be right back. My blood turned to ice. I scrambled out of bed, shook Lucas awake. "What?" he mumbled. "Ryan, he went upstairs to 606. Lucas sat up fast. "You're kidding." I showed him the message. We woke the girls. Within minutes, all 4 of us were heading to the stairwell. The elevator was out for the top floor, sealed off. We reached the landing for floor 6. A faded sign hung from the ceiling, barely visible in the emergency lighting. Restricted access, authorized personnel only. The hallway was cloaked in shadows. Dust thick on the tile, cobwebs in the corners. The air smelled of ash and mildew. We crept forward, flashlights from our phones barely piercing the gloom. Room 606 was at the far end. Its door was there, but it was locked, not with a card reader. With a heavy iron chain, looped through rusted handles, sealed with a corroded padlock. No way anyone had opened that. But from behind the door, we heard it. A voice, soft, like a whisper burned by smoke. "You shouldn't have come. He's one of us now." The air dropped 10 degrees. We stood frozen, hearts pounding. Then the voice again. He belongs here. Lucas lunged for the lock, rattled it, yelling Ryan's name. The chain didn't budge. But just then the door thudded hard, as if someone threw their body against it from inside. We screamed, ran, down the stairs, through the lobby, out into the parking lot. Ryan was gone, and his phone was still sending us messages. I'm okay, I'm with them. The lobby felt too bright, too loud. The late-night buzz of the spring break crowd clashed jarringly with the icy dread still clinging to our skin. We huddled in one corner, trying to make sense of what had just happened. No one else in the resort had any idea something horrifying had just occurred 3 floors up. Jen was crying softly. Maya stared at the text on Ryan's phone, Yitin, rereading it over and over as if the words might change. Lucas paced in small, tight circles, cursing under his breath. And me? I just sat there, phone in my hand, heart thudding like a drum. I'm okay, I'm with them. Those words didn't sound like Ryan, not his voice, not his tone. It felt wrong, like someone mimicking him, too calm, too detached. I'm going back up there, Lucas said. What? No, you're not, Maya snapped, grabbing his arm. Did you not hear the voice behind the door? He pulled away. Ryan could be in trouble. Maybe he's locked in, or locked in where? Behind a door that's sealed with a padlock older than we are? Jen's voice cracked. This doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. Lucas sat down again, his hands gripping the sides of his head. I know, but we can't just sit here. I nodded. We need help. And that's what we did. We flagged down security. The resort's night security team was skeptical at first. A man named Daryl, late 40s, tired eyes, with a younger guy named Eric, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. You're telling me your friend got into room 606? Daryl asked, after we repeated the story. Yeah, he texted us from up there, I said, showing them Ryan's messages. Daryl took the phone, frowning. That wing's been locked down since the fire in 03. Nobody's been up there in years. Maintenance doesn't even go near it. Mold, asbestos, all kinds of issues. But we heard a voice, Jen said, from inside the room. Eric scoffed. Kids probably messing with you. Echoes in these old hallways play tricks. No, Maya said firmly. It was real. Someone spoke to us, twice. And the door, someone slammed into it from inside. Daryl stared at us for a moment, then sighed. All right, let's check it out. We took the stairs again. Daryl led the way, flashlight in hand. Eric followed, mumbling about paranoid tourists. The hallway to the 6th floor was even colder than before, the air heavy and stale. Our footsteps echoed too loud against the tiles. When we reached room 606, Daryl paused. The chain was still there, still rusted, still tight across the door handles. This hasn't moved, he muttered, checking the padlock. And no way anyone's been inside. But he texted us from here, Lucas said. Someone's in there. Daryl knocked loudly. Resort security, anyone in there? Silence. He turned to Eric. Stay here, radio if anything happens. Then to us, you 4 back downstairs, now. We obeyed. But an hour later, after giving our statements, we learned something worse. Daryl checked the security cameras. Footage showed us going upstairs, but it never showed Ryan. Not leaving the room, not walking the halls, not entering the building that night. It was like he never existed, except his belongings were still in our room. His toothbrush, his backpack, his clothes, and his phone kept pinging our group chat. At 3:17 a.m. A new message. The door opened again. You can see them too now. We didn't sleep. We stayed in one room, curtains drawn, lights on. Every sound from the hallway made us flinch. At some point, Lucas turned on the TV just for noise. Static blared louder than expected. On the screen for half a second, we saw a room. Burned walls, ash floating like snow. A figure, half lit, standing in a corner. Then the feed cut back to the channel menu. No one spoke for a long time. In the morning, Ryan's phone was gone. Story, the stranger in the rental cabin. We drove 6 hours from campus, packed into Marcus's old SUV, which rattled every time we hit a bump. The road narrowed the deeper we got into the forest until it was little more than gravel and pine needles. Trees leaned in from both sides, their trunks thick, branches heavy. The sunlight dimmed, and it felt like entering a different world. At some point, we lost cell service, and none of us noticed until the GPS froze. Ellie laughed it off, but there was a tension in the air no one wanted to acknowledge. Tasha was the one who first commented that the forest seemed too quiet. No birds, no squirrels, just wind threading through pine needles and the faint sound of tires on gravel. When we finally saw the cabin, it was like a movie set, quaint, nestled into a clearing, and almost too perfect. Except it looked forgotten, like it had been waiting a long time for someone to return. Before stepping inside, Jordan took out his sketchbook. "I want to draw this," he said quietly, eyes fixed on the shadows beneath the porch. There's something off about the angle. None of us knew what he meant, but the way he stared gave me chills. Inside, the living room had a wall of dusty taxidermy. The eyes of a buck seemed to follow us. On the fireplace mantel, someone had left a faded photo in a cracked frame. 5 people standing in front of the cabin, dated 1979. Their expressions were strained. No one smiled. In the far left corner of the photo, a figure stood half in shadow, barely visible. So faint I thought it was a smudge. "Is that someone behind the tree?" Ellie asked, peering at it. "Probably just a shadow," Marcus said, flipping the frame down so it faced the wall. That night, as we unpacked, the light bulb in the hallway kept flickering. When I screwed it in tighter, it buzzed under my hand, even though the switch was off. Ellie said she felt a cold draft every time she passed the stairwell, though no windows were open. Jordan sat by the back door, sketching something with broad, erratic lines. When I peeked over his shoulder, I expected to see the trees. Instead, he'd drawn a hunched shape crouched beneath the porch. "Is that supposed to be?" I began. Jordan snapped the sketchbook shut. "Just a concept," but his hand was trembling. "We needed to get away. That was the whole point. Spring break had always been chaos for us. Crowds, drinking, the same overcrowded beach scenes. This year, we wanted something different. Quiet, isolated. So we booked a cabin deep in the woods of northern Vermont. No parties, no screaming college kids, just pine trees, cold mountain air, and the crackle of a fire. It was perfect, or at least it should have been. There were 5 of us: Ellie, my girlfriend, Marcus and Tasha, our close couple friends, and Jordan. Quiet, artsy, the kind of guy who always brought his sketchbook and never said no to coffee or ghost stories. The cabin was old but charming. 2 floors, a wraparound porch, and a view of nothing but forest in all directions. It had once been a ranger station in the 1960s, according to the listing. There was no cell reception, no Wi-Fi, and only one landline for emergencies. The nearest town was 20 miles away. We arrived just before dusk, the last light filtering through the tall pines like honey through stained glass. We unloaded groceries, picked rooms, and started a fire in the big stone hearth. The place smelled of cedar, dust, and something faintly metallic, like rusted pipes. Ellie made us grilled cheese sandwiches while Marcus found a box of old board games in a closet. Jordan wandered off with his sketchbook to sit on the back porch, watching the trees like they might whisper secrets. We joked about bears, told scary stories, and tried to pretend we weren't city kids in over our heads. That first night, nothing happened. Nothing unusual anyway. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to pee. The cabin creaked with the kind of deep-set groans old buildings make when the temperature drops. I passed by the kitchen and caught sight of the back door. It was slightly open. I froze. Had someone forgotten to lock it? Maybe Marcus had stepped out for a smoke, but when I peeked out, there was nothing. Just the trees. Still, silent. I closed the door gently and turned the bolt. In the morning, no one remembered leaving it open. We laughed it off. But that day, Jordan was quiet, more than usual. He didn't draw, didn't speak much, just kept looking at the tree line. "You good?" I asked. He shrugged. "I thought I saw something last night. Someone. In the woods?" He nodded. "Just a figure, standing still, watching. Probably your imagination, man." "Yeah," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. The second night, things got stranger. We stayed up late playing cards. The fire popped and hissed. Outside, the wind rattled the porch swing. At around 1:45 a.m., the power went out. "Just gone." We lit candles, joking nervously. Marcus said it was probably old wiring. Ellie checked the breaker box. Everything looked fine. Tasha, always practical, said we'd deal with it in the morning. We settled back into bed, bundled under extra blankets. The silence was deeper now, almost physical. That's when Ellie shook me awake. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "What?" "Someone's on the porch." My heart jumped. We listened. Creak, slow, deliberate, like footsteps on old wood. I grabbed the flashlight, tiptoed to the window, and pulled back the curtain just an inch. There was no one there, just the porch swing swaying gently. Too gently, like it had been touched. I didn't sleep much after that. In the morning, we found the back door open again. Only this time, we were sure it had been locked. And Jordan's phone was missing. So was Tasha's wallet. We searched everywhere. Nothing. Then we remembered the camera. There was a motion sensor camera mounted near the back door, part of the old ranger station's original setup. It still worked, connected to a small battery-powered monitor. We rewound the footage. At 2:04 a.m., the screen showed static. Then, movement, a shape. From beneath the cabin, something crawled out. A man, pale, gaunt, in tattered clothes. He dragged himself forward, slow and deliberate. He stood and stared into the back window for 3 hours, never moving, just watching. Then just as slowly, he slid back beneath the cabin. We sat there paralyzed. No one spoke. The footage looped. His face, blurry but unmistakably human, burned into our minds. He had no eyebrows, no hair, and eyes that didn't blink. The landline was dead. Our car wouldn't start. The trees seemed closer than they had the day before. The day passed slowly. At one point, Ellie opened a curtain slightly and froze. "Guys, the swing's moving again." I walked over and looked. Sure enough, the old porch swing creaked slowly, though the trees weren't swaying and the air outside looked completely still. It wasn't the wind, and worse, there were footprints on the porch, bare, muddy, leading to the back door. We hadn't heard anything. We triple-checked every window, locked every door, pushed furniture against the front and back entrances. Jordan found an old rusted hatchet in the tool shed out back and handed it to Marcus like it was a ceremonial sword. Around noon, we finally ventured outside to investigate beneath the cabin. Marcus crouched low, flashlight in hand, and slowly shined it under the building. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he stood up, his face pale. "There's a space down there, big enough to crawl into, and something's been living there." "What do you mean?" Tasha asked. "Old rags, moldy blankets, bones. Some look human." I felt the blood drain from my face. That night, we blocked the crawl space with cinder blocks from the shed. It felt like a flimsy gesture, but none of us could think of anything better. We didn't cook, barely spoke. Jordan sat sketching obsessively, his pencil scratching in harsh, erratic lines. As night fell, the air grew heavy again. The lights flickered, then went out completely. Only candles lit the room now. At some point around midnight, Ellie whispered, "Listen." We went still. From beneath the floorboards, scratching. Not animal scratching, fingers, nails. It circled the house again. This time we followed it, creeping from room to room as it passed below, like a shark circling a stranded boat. Then it stopped, right beneath the living room. Jordan stood, walked slowly to the rug in the center of the floor and pulled it aside. Beneath it, a hatch. We hadn't noticed it before. No one moved. Jordan placed his palm on it and whispered, "It's calling." To be continued. We stayed inside for hours, huddled around the fireplace. Not saying, no one had the energy to joke anymore. Even Marcus had gone quiet, his usual sarcasm swallowed by the heavy silence that settled over the cabin. Tasha sat by the window with a kitchen knife clutched in her hand, eyes fixed on the tree line. Ellie kept pacing back and forth, biting her nails. Jordan had retreated to a corner of the living room, scribbling furiously into his sketchbook. "I think he's still out there," Tasha whispered at one point. No one responded. We didn't sleep that night. Around 5 a.m., the sun rose, weak and pale through the clouds. The woods outside looked different. The shadows seemed longer, the trees closer to the house, like the forest was creeping in inch by inch. I tried the car again, nothing. The battery was completely dead, but it had worked fine when we arrived. We debated hiking out, but none of us wanted to leave the cabin, not after seeing what had crawled from beneath it. "Why was he just standing there?" Ellie asked, hugging herself. "For hours?" "He wanted us to see him," Jordan murmured. His voice was hoarse. "He wanted us to know he's here." "What do you mean?" I asked. Jordan slowly turned his sketchbook around. The pages were filled with drawings, dozens of them, all of the same gaunt figure, staring in through the window. Except in some drawings, he wasn't alone. There were more, shadowy forms behind him, all eyeless, all smiling. "I didn't draw these on purpose," Jordan whispered. "It's like something's guiding my hand." That night, we took shifts watching the doors. Around 2:15 a.m., while Marcus and I were on watch, we heard something dragging along the back wall, like nails against wood, then footsteps. From inside the walls, we looked at each other. Neither of us moved. The sound circled the cabin slowly, methodically. Tap, tap, tap. Something scraped across the porch and then silence. When we checked the camera again, it had been disabled. The monitor only displayed a single image, the cabin from a distance surrounded by woods. Except this time in the trees, there were figures, watching, unmoving, dozens of them, and they were closer than before. The hatch creaked as we slowly pried it open. A rank wave of air rushed up from below, damp, cold, and stinking of rot. It was the kind of smell that hit the back of your throat and made your eyes water. We all staggered back, gagging, except for Jordan. He just stared down into the dark, like it was calling to him. "There's more down there," he said softly. "Jordan," I warned, but he was already climbing in. I looked at Marcus. He was pale, sweating. "We can't let him go alone." So Marcus followed, then me. Ellie and Tasha stayed behind, their voices echoing down after us, telling us to be careful. But their words felt like they were from a different world. The crawl space was bigger than any of us imagined. It wasn't just a gap beneath the house. It was a tunnel, crude, dug by hand, supported by old beams and splintered planks. It sloped downward, and it was cold, freezing, not like above, like we had crossed into another climate entirely. We followed Jordan's flashlight, the beam flickering in the damp. "Where are you going?" I asked. "I saw it in the sketch," Jordan said. "There's something here, something old." We passed piles of moldy clothes, bits of plastic, a child's doll, its eyes gouged out. Someone had written on the tunnel walls with what looked like charcoal, or maybe blood. The writing was smeared, incoherent. Then we saw the pictures. Polaroids, dozens of them, pinned to wooden boards hammered into the earth. All of us, sleeping. Some taken from inches away, our mouths open, our eyes shut. There were more photos, strangers, people we didn't recognize, in different clothes, different beds. Some black and white, faded. Jordan stopped. Ahead was a chamber, round like a nest, and in the center, story, the photo that shouldn't exist. It was the last night of spring break. The air was cool, tinged with salt and sugar from the snack stands lining the boardwalk. Neon lights shimmered on wet pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang and a crowd erupted into laughter. Natalie clutched her hoodie closer as they approached the entrance to the final ride of the night. Cyclone Fury. A towering beast of steel and wood, the roller coaster loomed above the rest of the fairground like a monument to adolescent recklessness. Half of the group was ecstatic. The other half, Natalie included, had to fake their enthusiasm. "We've been talking about this ride since Tuesday," Darren grinned, nudging her with his elbow. "You're not backing out now." "I'm not backing out," she lied, "just mentally preparing." "Mentally preparing," laughed Alex, recording a story on his phone. Classic Natalie. Someone film her face during the drop. "Let's just do this," she said, forcing a smile. The group lined up, Natalie, Darren, Alex, Marcy, and Sean, 5 college friends who had crammed every second of this vacation with too much food, too little sleep, and just enough chaos to call it perfect. The queue moved quickly. Workers in faded uniforms chatted mechanically, buckling seatbelts and checking safety harnesses. There were only a few people left at the park. Most of the crowd had thinned. Cyclone Fury's train screeched to a stop in front of them. "All aboard," said the ride operator, barely looking up from his panel. They climbed in, Sean and Marcy in front, Natalie and Darren in the middle, and Alex, who insisted on sitting alone for maximum airtime, took the very back seat. The safety bar dropped. Natalie's hands gripped the sides of her seat. A buzzing speaker crackled above them. "Smile for the camera halfway through." Then the ride jolted into motion. The climb was the worst part, a slow, agonizing ascent up a skeletal incline that offered a panoramic view of the entire park and nothing to stop you from imagining the fall. Click, click, click. Each mechanical lurch upward made Natalie's chest tighter. Beside her, Darren cheered. "This is it. We're gods now." She looked over her shoulder. Alex was already yelling into the wind, arms raised, camera in hand. At the very top, for just a second, everything stilled. Natalie stared out at the sea of lights. For a split second, the world felt impossibly still. She could see the outline of the ocean in the distance, the scattered glitter of streetlights along the pier, and a few straggling figures far below. It was strangely beautiful, peaceful, a moment suspended in time. Then the lights above her flickered. Just once, she blinked. And then, the drop. Her stomach turned to the liquid. The wind howled past. The ride jerked and dove and twisted with relentless force. Screams filled the night. Real, terrified, joyful screams. And halfway through, as promised, a flash, a camera hidden in the curve of the track. Click. Then the ride was over. They stumbled out, laughing and breathless. "Did you scream?" Alex asked Natalie. "I think I blacked out," she said. They headed toward the photo booth, a small wooden kiosk that displayed pictures from each ride cycle. The screens flashed with grids of snapshots, open mouths, flying hair, sheer panic. Then theirs appeared. Natalie's breath caught. There they were, all 5 of them. Sean and Marcy up front, Darren beside her, Alex in the back. But something was wrong. Behind Alex, in the supposedly empty back row, was a face, pale, featureless, like a porcelain mask with hollow black eyes. It stared directly into the lens. Marcy noticed first. Wait, who the hell is that? The group went silent. Alex turned. No one was behind me. I would have seen. Natalie stepped closer to the screen. The figure wasn't blurry, wasn't a glitch. It was perfectly lit by the camera flash, seated bolt upright in the last row with its hands on its knees. And it was looking straight at them. A second passed. 2, Sean spoke quietly. It's gotta be a prank, right? Like, maybe they edited it? No one's that fast, Darren muttered. That was seconds ago. They called over the nearest staff member, a young woman with a headset and a bored expression. What's the issue? They pointed at the screen. She frowned. There shouldn't be anyone there, she said. Those back seats were locked off tonight. One of the seatbelts broke last week. Marcy took out her phone to take a picture of the screen. Sorry, the employee added quickly. We don't allow photos of the ride photos. Park policy. Marcy hesitated. Can we delete it? The woman nodded. Sure. She tapped a few buttons. The screen blinked. Their photo was gone. They stood there for a moment, unsure what to say. The whole situation felt surreal, like something from a campfire ghost story. They laughed it off, but it was the kind of laughter that came with edge, the kind that masked unease. As they walked away, Natalie turned to glance back at the screen. Another group's photo had replaced theirs. Normal, cheerful, no one in the back seat, just friends having a fun night. But in the reflection on the monitor's glossy surface, Natalie thought she saw something pale pass behind them. She whipped around. Nothing. Everything okay? Darren asked. Yeah, she lied. The group made their way through the nearly empty park, past shut-down food stands and closed game booths. The smell of popcorn and fryer oil lingered in the air like perfume of another world. Above them, the Ferris wheel stood still, its gondolas swaying gently in the night breeze. Hey, did you guys see anyone else riding with us? Natalie asked, unable to stop herself. No, Sean said. You saw the seats, empty. Then who the hell was that? Some weird glitch, Alex said. I mean, cameras mess up all the time. You ever see those filter fails on TikTok? Natalie didn't respond. They reached the exit gates. The security guards nodded as they passed. Outside, a few taxis waited near the curb. They split up, Alex and Sean heading to their hotel downtown, while Natalie, Darren, and Marcy made their way back to the beach house they'd rented. The road was dark and quiet. Natalie kept looking behind her. Nothing but shadows. She didn't sleep well that night. Her dreams were chaotic, roller coaster tracks stretching endlessly into black voids, screams echoing from far below, and always that pale face, staring at her with eyes like ink spilled on porcelain. At 3:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. Just once, she checked the screen. No calls, no messages. Only a new notification in her gallery. One new image saved. And there it was, the ride photo. Exactly the same. Except now the pale figure had moved. It was no longer in the back row. It was sitting just one row behind her. Natalie stared at the image on her phone, her thumb hovering above the screen. She didn't remember saving the picture. In fact, she was sure no one had sent it to her, and yet there it was. The same ride photo, crystal clear. Everyone screaming, everyone laughing. But now the pale face was closer. She tried to convince herself it was a mistake, maybe a cached image that reloaded somehow. But deep down, a knot twisted in her stomach. She texted the group. Natalie, guys, did anyone else get that ride photo again? On your phone? A minute passed, then, Darren, what, I thought it was deleted? Marcy, wait, I just checked. It's on mine too. Sean, dude, mine too. This isn't so much. This isn't funny. Alex, WTF, I didn't even download it. Why is it in my gallery? They compared screenshots. Every photo was the same, but with one small difference. The pale figure was in a different spot in each. In Natalie's, it was in the second row, just behind her. In Sean's, it was in the third row, right next to him. In Alex's, it was in the front seat. And in Marcy's, it was standing behind them all, where there shouldn't have been any ground. That day, strange things started happening. Natalie's phone battery dropped from 90% to 2% in minutes. Her gallery kept crashing every time she tried to delete the image. She put her phone on airplane mode, but every time she checked, The photo was still there, still updating. Now the pale figure's head was tilted at a different angle. She deleted the image. 3 times, it came back every time. That night, while brushing her teeth, she saw a shadow in the bathroom mirror. At first, she thought it was just her hair. But the outline was wrong. Too still, too tall. It was gone when she turned around, but the air behind her was colder than it should have been. Alex reported that his smart TV turned on by itself at 3:17 a.m., flashing static. For 5 minutes, it wouldn't turn off. And when the screen finally cleared, it showed the ride photo, zoomed in on the pale face. He threw a blanket over it and unplugged the TV, but the image stayed burned into his mind. The group agreed to meet the next morning at a local diner. They sat in a corner booth, hushed, phones on the table. None of them had slept. "Someone hacked us," Darren said. "It's got to be a prank. Maybe the park's doing some viral thing." "I called the park," Sean said. "They have no records of our photos. Nothing from last night was archived. They even said their system was down for maintenance." "They deleted the photo," Natalie whispered. "We watched them do it. And now it's back," Marcy said, her voice low. "And it's watching us." The table went silent. Alex broke it with a joke, half laughing. "Okay, so what? Do we burn our phones? Salt the earth? Call a priest?" No one laughed. Natalie reached for her phone. There was a new notification. New image saved, 3:17 a.m. She opened it. The photo again. But now the pale figure was in the road directly behind her, its face tilted slightly, smiling. They decided to each sleep with their phones off that night. Natalie placed hers face down and turned it off completely. She even removed the battery. She kept the pieces in separate drawers. Still, at 3:17 a.m., her smoke detector beeped. Not the fire alarm, just a single loud beep that repeated every few seconds. She got up, opened the hallway closet, and found nothing wrong. But her phone, disassembled and powerless, was back together, sitting on her dresser, and glowing. When she opened it, the screen flickered to life on its own. The photo was there again. This time, the pale figure had moved. It was no longer seated. It was leaning over her shoulder. She screamed. The next day, she showed the photo to the others. They had all received the same update, each version different. In Sean's, the figure had one hand on his neck. In Marcy's, it was in the background, waving. In Alex's, the figure had moved halfway out of the photo as if trying to step through the screen. Natalie couldn't take it anymore. "We have to go back," she said. "Back to the park, back to the ride. We need to see if there's something there." "Like what?" Darren asked. "A ghost concierge?" "I don't know, but something followed us, and it's not stopping." They agreed to meet the next night, but Sean didn't show up. His phone went straight to voicemail. Marcy tried to find him at his dorm. His bed was made, lights off, windows locked. But his phone was on the floor, screen cracked, open to the ride photo. The pale figure had taken his place in the seat. Natalie couldn't sleep. The photo haunted her, not just in her phone, but in reflections, in dreams. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that pale face, closer, smiling, like it knew something she didn't. Sean was gone, officially missing, no signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. But Natalie knew, deep down, they all did. That night, she packed a bag and drove to the park alone. The fairground was closed for the season, fenced off with rusted gates. But she climbed over anyway. She wasn't afraid of getting caught. She was afraid of what would happen if she didn't come. The cyclone fury stood dead and silent under the moonlight, a skeleton of twisted metal. She stood in front of it, heart racing, and then she heard it. A faint click, the sound of a camera. She turned, no one there. Another click. She walked toward the ride platform. The entrance gate creaked open even though no one was around. She stepped inside. The air was colder here. The booth where the ride operator once stood was dark, but the screen, the one that displayed photos, was on. Her photo appeared. This time only she was in the seats, and the pale figure was standing behind her. No longer smiling, its mouth was open wide like it was screaming silently. A low hum buzzed through the speaker. Then a voice, garbled, distant. "Natalie!" She stumbled back. The ride started moving. The empty coaster rolled forward, chain pulling it up the incline. She ran, out of the platform, through the fence, into the parking lot. But the world felt wrong, too quiet, like she had stepped out of time. Her phone buzzed. New image saved, 3:17 a.m. She didn't look, not at first. But when she reached her car, heart pounding, she glanced at the screen. The photo showed her running. Behind her, the figure. Closer than ever, she screamed, and the world went black. They found her 2 days later, alone, curled up in the front seat of her car, parked just outside the fence. She was breathing, alive, but she wouldn't speak. Not a word. Her phone was gone. But scratched into the inside of her car window were 3 words. It's still here. Weeks later, Alex received a new image in his gallery. The same photo. This time he wasn't in it. Only the pale figure, sitting in the middle row, looking directly at the lens. And behind it, barely visible, was another face. Natalie's, mouth wide open, still screaming,